Assalamu'alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 4 and the members of Group 4 is Fanesha Pratiwi, Vina Rahmadiana, Pipit Indah Wati, Imam Syafi'i, Mochammad Novan Dianata, and me Ihbarul Rosida. And here we want to explain about the part of second language acquisition is motivation. The first point is about the traditional approach, DAMTB, and motivational quantity. Motivation is commonly understood to refer to the urge to initiate second language learning, and the effort has been made to maintain it, and we all consider it to be a matter of quantity in lay terms, as in the daily finding that some learners are highly motivated and others have little or no motivation. The overall value of motivation in the socio-educational model is quantified in three dimensions, each measured on a separate scale in the AMTB. The first is effort, second enjoyment, and the third investment. The first is effort. Motivational strength, which we can describe as how much effort individuals supposedly spend on learning the language. And yeah, the effort is an important part to strengthen our motivation of learning language. And the second is about enjoyment. Attitudes towards learning the second language, which we can see as examining how much enjoyment individual experience when we learning the language. And the third is about investment. Desire to learn, which can typically be understood as how much personal investment people are saying for themselves in the language of succeed. And the second point is about integrativeness as an antecedent of motivations. An aim of motivation of early motivation research was to be able to calculate the amount of early motivation research accurately. An individual's desire to learn the second language will be felt and to decide whether a fair proportion of his or her second language achievement level that can be estimated by this determined number. In understanding language learning motivation, however, it's equally or more important to clarify what factors lead to increases or decreases in the amount of motivation. Integrativeness is an attitude established as a genuinely interest in learning the second language in order to come closer to the other language culture. According to Gardner 2001, three dimensions are associated. First, favorable attitudes toward second language speaker. Second, common curiosity and low ethnocentrism in foreign languages. And the third, encouragement of second language learning reasons related to communications with second language members, or in Gardner terms, an integrative orientation is necessary for me to study French because it will allow me to meet and converse with more and more diverse people.
Other antecedents, orientation and attitudes. In this part, we focus on the orientation and attitudes. Orientation in this part refer to reason for learning the L2 because they contribute to the setting of goals that will proper and sustain motivation of varying intensities and qualities. Of course, reasons are not antithetical or mutually exclusive, and therefore a given individual may exhibit several orientations at once. There are 5 orientations for learning a language that L2 learners most commonly report across contexts. that the first is instrumental when pragmatic and utilitarian reasons are important, such as getting a better job or pursuing a higher level of education in the L2. The second is for knowledge or an enlightened understanding of one's own identity, language, or culture, and to become a more knowledgeable person. To facilitate travel to other countries or parts of a country. And the next for fostering general friendship with members of the target language. And the last is for integrative reason related to identification with the target culture and a genuine desire to become more like member of the L2 group. As a reminder, in the socio-educational model, this integrative orientation is only one of three components of integrativeness, which in turn is only one of several components of the integrative motivation. In addition to the reason that cause people to want to learn L2, attitude towards the L2 and its speakers will contribute to increase L2 motivation. This attitude comes from the collective value, belief, attitudes, and even behavior that are rewarded and modeled for the learner in the communities in which he or she participates, be it classroom, the family, or the wider environment of neighborhoods and institutions. This influence constitutes what social psychologists call the sociocultural milieu.
First side of renewal, self-determination theory and intrinsic motivation. The first developmental period began in 1960, which was the year that the first surveillance of L2 motivation research began. By using a consolidated social educational model in the study, more contemporary motivational research has been generated by criticism. At the end of 1970, Edward Deci and Richard Ryan made a theory called macro theory. This theory is very influential from a human motivation. Human behavior in this theory is based on the impulse to determine our own action and activities. Within this specific area of L2, the socio-educational model continues to provide important insights into understanding L2 motivation. Next, motivation from a distance, EFL learners' orientation and attitude. In particular, motivation in the EFL context has attracted a great deal of research interest in recent years. The orientation itself can be very different in a foreign language than in a second language context. The pattern is something that is very consistent using only English media or culture interest orientation. The efficient, the need and desire in L2 communication relating to foreigners and foreign countries in general is related to specific target group and cultures.
Language learning motivation, possible in situation of conflict. Donitsa Smith et al. Studied a representative sample of 539 fourth, fifth, and sixth grades in 9 schools in Tel Aviv who had begun studying spoken Arabic experimentally at age 9. These children's attitudes and motivation were compared to those of a representative sample of 153 same-age students in 5 other schools who, following the national norm, would not begin studying Arabic until the 7th grade or age 12. When the researchers gave all these middle school children the opportunity to provide open-ended comment about why the study of spoken Arabic should be given priority as an L3 in school in Israel, and therefore the most frequently mentioned reason were that for A, the Arabs surround us, and B, we need to communicate with the Arabs, and C, we need to learn about their culture and make peace with them, and D, it is instrumental for finding a job, university studies, watching TV and so on, and the last, we need to fight the enemy. Fortunately, the subset of 539 students who were already studying spoken Arabic at the time answered the question by consistently emphasizing mostly reason C and D both, when compared to the other students who would not begin learning Arabic until 7th grade. It means they mention peace-oriented and pragmatically oriented reason for the study of Arabic in Israel more frequently. Not only that, the result of the study in Bar et al. In 2001 that focused on other students found that the 12 years old children who were studying Arabic had higher motivation and more positive attitude toward the L2 and its speaker than students who were studying another language. And this was true regardless of whether they had enrolled in Arabic or the other LT voluntarily or forced by the institutional circumstances. It can be concluded that more in-depth study of the motivation of language learners occurs a largest variety of conflictual settings, and including not only orientation, attitude and motivational intensity, but also behavioral evidence of actual long-term commitment and persistence to learn the L2 would make a real contribution to motivation theory as well as to promoting world peace.
Okay, the next is dynamic motivation, times, context, and behavior. Motivational change over time are to be expected. They also warm that the dual focus on attendance and voice of L2 motivation on the one hand and on L2 achievement as the only creation to establish that motivations matter on the other mean that there was almost a complete disagreement among L2 research for exploiting the consequence of high or low motivation and actual behavior. Contemporary work on L2 motivation is also beginning to consider how the motivates behavior is a property that emerges out of the situated activity of the social unit of the classroom or the group. Another recent change is the recognition that beyond L2 achievement, we need to see what a change in behavioral motivation can cause.
Assalamu'alaikum warohmatullohi wabarakatuh. Number 8.8. Looking forward, the L2 motivational self-system. Perhaps the most significant change in how we may understand motivation in future years is the L2 motivation self-system. This theory becomes the specific motivation for language one theory of regulatory focus and the notion that humans make decisions as to how to act motivated by reference to an ideal self. Theory hygienists posit that humans self-regulate their behavior motivated by the need to balance a promotion focus, in which we are able to anticipate gain or pleasure from an action, and a prevention focus, in which we are able to anticipate pain or shame from the same action. Dornier proposed the construct of L2 motivation self-system, which is made up of three main components. First is ideal L2 self, referring to the L2 specific phase of one's ideal self. If the person we would like to become speaks an L2, the ideal L2 self is a powerful motivator to learn the particular language, because we would like to reduce the discrepancy between our actual and ideal selves. Second, ought to L2 self, referring to the attribute that we believe we ought to process to avoid possible negative outcomes. This motivational dimension may therefore bear little resemblance to our own desires or wishes. Next, L2 learning experience, which concern executive motives, relate to the immediate learning environment and experience. The highly motivated individual will score high in integrativeness, will simultaneously being intrinsically as well as instrumentally motivated to learn that L2 because of a format L2 speaking ideal self that she or he can anticipate as a reference point, and that link L2 success with a promotion focus. The most motivated individuals will develop high motivation, correlate to a self-report strong intention to invest effort to learn the L2, and general high interest in learning foreign language. These motivated individuals exhibit this pattern because of a well-developed in L2 self. The highly motivated individual will be also instrumentally or more extrinsically motivated by anticipated pragmatic reward and utility that we see in learning an L2, where individuals with lower quality motivation to learn L2, they exhibit less powerful motivation that is nourished by reference to the L2 self rather than the ID L2 self. They are still fueled by motivation, but of an extrinsic kind. C types of learner are typically even less motivated because, without a sense of instrumentally, by reference to the L2 self, or integrativeness by reference to the ideal of L2 self. Positive attitude alone cannot sufficiently boost motivational intensity. Thank you.
Behold the power of motivation. The association between motivation and behavior change, as well as L2 learning success, has always been viewed as reciprocal. Being motivated nurtures more successful L2 learning, but conversely, experiencing L2 learning success also boosts motivation to even higher level in a reinforcing cycle. The challenge that has opened up with the innovation since the late 1990s, and particularly since the turn of the new century, resides in implementing studies that do justice to the complexity and dynamicity of motivation to learn additional language. Such future studies will have to take into consideration the ebbs and flows of time, the fluctuation that come with changing context, and the many reciprocal influences that fuel and sustain behaviors and desires need to learn an additional language.